the people who wrote that book, first of all, like it was assembled loosely as a book, right? It's a bunch of books, that's what Bible means. It was edited and assembled across vast stretches of time. We have no idea what process led people to assemble it that way, except that they felt that that made sense. You know, so they were guided by their internal intuition of meaning. Weirdly enough, it produced a document with a narrative. Now, the narrative is difficult in some ways to discern, given all the detail, you know. So I would say, give our ancestors a break, for God's sake. What do you want? You want absolute, perfect coherence when they're trying to be so inclusive? Like, it's very hard to be coherent when you're trying to be inclusive. Those two things battle. So, you know, have a little respect. That's how it looks to me. Those people weren't stupid. They were seriously not stupid. Okay, so you make your sacrifices. It's like, why do people do that? God, that's primitive. It's like, no. The invention of the sacrifice was probably the single greatest stroke of genius that mankind ever was given or produced. What is a sacrifice? You give up something of value now so that things might be better in the future. It's like, that's the human discovery. That's the human discovery of time. Everybody makes sacrifices. It's like, I'm going to go to university instead of partying and, you know, snorting cocaine. It's like, because that's fun. Why? Well, because if I organize my behavior properly and I make the right sacrifices, God will smile on me in the future, or at least the probability seems enhanced. It's like, okay, well, we don't use the same terminology. Well, we use the same terminology. We don't burn rabbits, you know, but then again, we're not agriculturalists. So the people who were playing with the idea of sacrifice, like they were acting out the discovery of time. You can give up something now. Try to get a bone from a dog and tell him you're going to give him 2 bones. It's like, he doesn't give a damn about that. Bone now. You know, and we regard the civilized person as the person who's capable of deferring gratification. Deferring gratification is a sacrifice. Does it please God? Well, everyone thinks so, or they wouldn't do it. So you burn the sacrifice. Why? Well, God's in heaven. How else is he going to figure out the quality of your sacrifice? Well, you might say, well, that's primitive. It's like, don't be so sure. It's like they got the sacrifice idea right. They got the awe part right. Like if they're acting it out, it's concretized. It's like a drama. Does that make it primitive? Well, no, it's not primitive. It's unbelievably sophisticated. It's ridiculously sophisticated. Because the mode in the Old Testament is you make the right sacrifices and you will thrive. It's like, do we believe that? Yeah, it's the basis of civilized behavior. You don't get a complex civilization without that presupposition. Okay, well, let's talk about the metaphysics. Okay, whose idea of God are you talking about? It's like, is God an old man with a beard? And he lives in the sky? Okay, well, let's take that argument apart a little bit. Okay, first of all, the ancient Jews, they didn't like you to say the name of God. Why? Because they didn't want you to confuse the representation with the phenomena. So whatever was real for them was something beyond words. Okay, the same thing obtains with Taoism, same idea, right? Don't make a graven image because you confuse the damn image with the thing. What's the thing? It's that which is beyond imaging. Does that which is beyond imaging exist? Obviously. What's its nature? Well, that's a different question. Now, in the Old Testament, its nature is arbitrary, man. It's like, look the hell out. You're going to get swatted down. But if you look carefully at the structure of the Old Testament, and Northrop Frye did this, Frye's argument was basically this. Well, you've got the really old stories. Forget about them. History starts basically with Abraham. What is the Old Testament about? The Israelites climb up to dominance. They get corrupt. They forget about the widows and the children. A prophet comes up and says, you better look out. You're off the path. They ignore him. Whap! They're in chaos for like a long time. They get all humble and they build themselves up again. And when they get power, they get all corrupt. And a prophet comes along and says, you better look out. You're off the path. You're not paying attention to the widows and the children. And all hell's going to break loose. Like bang, down they go. 6 times. 6 times. So, you know, is that arbitrary? Or is that actually the right idea to derive from history? It's like power corrupts. So you make your kingdom, you make your empire, and it's serving its proper purpose. But you let it get corrupt, things are going to fall apart. So I can give you an example of that. It's like, what caused the flooding in New Orleans? Hurricane. No. No. Corruption. If the dikes would have been built properly, as everyone knew they should have been built, if all those millions of dollars had gone into the pockets of corrupt politicians, there wouldn't have been any flood. In Holland, they built the dikes for the worst storm in 10,000 years. In New Orleans, they built them for the worst storm in 100 years. Well, everyone knew that was insufficient. So why didn't they do something about it? Well, if you get corrupt enough, God will send a flood. It's like, it's an old story. It's right.